edition of East Coast Bias as the boys are ready for the Saturday of Final Four action. We are coming in on the home stretch of the NBA season. And yes, our friends at FanDuel have actually thrown way too early NFL over-under win totals, despite the fact we do not have a draft yet. And yes, we do not have a schedule yet, but we do know opponents. We'll have some fun with that. And the boys are ready to rock and roll. We welcome in Raheem Palmer, Joe House, and our college basketball guru, who's been spending way too much time with us over the last few weeks. Anthony Dabbundo, are you feeling nostalgic that the Final Four is about to come Saturday and that the college tournament is about to wrap up? Or what's the feeling? How do we feel right about now, amigo?
Well, I'm disappointed because we've only got 3 more opportunities to bet race to tens, but I'm excited for what should be on paper a great Final Four. And I know that we've said this seemingly every round, like just wait, the next round's going to be great. And we've had some good games scattered in, but really this is kind of a clash of titans matchup, 2 matchups really on Saturday night. So hoping it lives up to the billing for a great Final Four.
No doubt about it. House, we've gone through this NCAA tournament. It was Chalk City in the first 2 rounds. It was Chalk City in the next 2 rounds. That said, we did see some more competitive games. If you think about Texas Tech and Arkansas, you think about Texas Tech and Florida, just far more entertaining watches the second weekend of the tournament. But is there anything that you would take away as far as a lesson from what you learned in the first weekend, from what you learned in the second weekend, that maybe can help you as we are about to go and handicap these 2 games?
Well, in the first place, the number one lesson is just go play moneyline favorites right away. Don't wait. Don't hesitate. Go do it. It's been the trend. It's been the class of this tournament showing out. All of the favorites won in the Elite 8. All the favorites won in the Sweet 16. I mean, it's just been a crazy run of favorites. I will say, as we come into this moment, we've had a little bit more time in the lab. I'm starting to lose some of my confidence in one particular team, and we will get there over the course of this conversation. But I do think there is an interesting path for Houston, JJ.
Interesting. And Raheem, I know this. You love the numbers. We dissect this all the time when we do the Ringer NFL Sunday pregame show with the wise guys. And we love to talk about who the public's going to be backing and who they're going to be riding. I think it's a perfect transition. Don't you think with what we've seen from Duke, the brand name pedigree that they are, having all the NBA talent, having the number 1 pick in the draft in Cooper Flagg, there's going to be a whole lot of liability within the books as far as Duke on Saturday, Duke on Monday. I think we have to assume that's going to be the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely going to be the case. I think you're going to have a lot of sharp people who are just going to be waiting for the public to just bet Duke up and take Houston. And Houston has a ton of experience. They have a lot of upperclassmen. So I think, they're a team who probably could present themselves as a live dog, and sharps are probably going to be on.
Okay, Dabbundo. We had UConn last year in a similar spot to what Duke is in this year. Now, it's drastically different from a standpoint of UConn was going for back-to-back. They had a lot of returning players from a championship team, all that yada, yada. But as far as the dominance that we've seen, there was a level of dominance we saw from UConn in coasting through the NCAA tournament. And it was almost as if, hey, don't think about the number. Don't think twice about it. Just keep betting them, even if the KenPom number and what the actual spread number might be doesn't matter. Keep riding with UConn, and that obviously treated you well. Do you have a similar vibe for this Duke team where even if a certain number might be, hey, such and such, it is inflated because of the Duke brand, and don't think twice about it because, hey, it's Duke? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, there was certainly an element of UConn's inevitability last year, and a lot of it I thought boiled down to, 1, just how difficult their offense was to game plan for, and 2, Donovan Clingan kind of being such a dominant presence at the rim that you just couldn't score on them without hitting a bunch of really tough jump shots. And I kind of think, Malawach maybe isn't Clingan, but he's close to it in terms of rim protection. And you're just not able to get anything at the rim against this Duke team. And so you have to be able to be really good at perimeter shot making, at tough mid-range shot making. And the only team who's even come close to Duke got a generationally good shooting performance and shot making performance from Caleb Love, and from that, really the whole Arizona team played really well in that game. And thus they had to score into the 90s with Duke just to keep up. I don't know who, I don't know if Houston is that team, is kind of my point. Like, they have shot makers. Houston certainly has the defense that Arizona and Alabama did not, but I don't know which one of those teams I trust the most over a 40-minute period, to be honest. And of the four Final Four participants, I actually think it is Houston, just because of Houston's ability to slow a game down, force you to play in the half court. They're very comfortable doing that. I just don't know if Houston has the offense to keep up with the ruthless Duke efficiency.
Okay. Line's 4.5. I thought it might climb, House. It did for a brief period. It got to 5.5. Then it got bet down right back to 4.5. I still feel supremely confident in Duke going and winning this game. I still think at the end of the day, they're going to go and cover the number. I swore after the Arizona game I wouldn't bet them again. I wouldn't bet against them again in the NCAA tournament. I'm sticking to my guns here. I'm not deviating off of that. You mentioned, though, that you have a sense of hesitation. And I don't know if it's going to be for the next matchup, but the feeling I get from the conversation we had on Monday is that maybe, buddy boy, you're getting some cold feet and laying it with Duke. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. And in fact, Anthony just touched on a couple of the factors. And really, I hope that this gets to 5.5 again, because then I will really plow into Houston. But even the 4.5 is starting to feel like a bit of a stretch to me in two ways. First of all, I think Houston is the first team that Duke will play maybe in like a dozen games since they lost to Clemson that can match up defensively. They have an extraordinary wing defender in the guy, I'm going to mess up the name, Dabbundo, Tuglo, Joseph, whatever his name is, one of the best wing defenders. Tugler, that's it. That's the guy. And that's a matchup for Flagg, who has, he won the East Regional Most Outstanding Player, but the homie's shooting under 43%. And I don't think his shot selection has been incredible. He looked like he was, forcing things a tiny bit in that Arizona game. But to me, really, the fact that Houston is very good from 3-point, one of the third team in the country shooting percentage wise, this is a 1-game tournament. So shooting variance is everything. If they come in and they're hot, they can shoot the lights out, and it could be akin to what Alabama did, where they came in and just rained threes and blew. Now, I'm not saying that is what I'm imagining, but I'm pointing it out for the purpose of saying the 3-point shooting variance is an element to this handicap. The last thing is there are some good numbers that support the idea of a seasoned coach, a coach that's been to the Final Four a couple times in the form of Kelvin Sampson, having an advantage over a guy that's making an initial appearance. And there's some good against the spread numbers, there's some good straight up numbers. So when I put all that together, I'm not as keen on rushing right in and laying the points with Duke, and especially if it gets up to 5.5. JJ,
interesting. Okay, Raheem. I'm on the Duke train. I'm not jumping off that Duke train. I hate that I'm riding with Joe Public. Gut feel, when you're sitting down Saturday, if you had made a play on this game, would you take the points with Houston, or would you lay it with the better team in Duke?
I don't have anything on this game, but I think at this point in time, it's just tough to fade Duke. So I'm staying away from this one. I think you're probably going to have the public all on Duke, and I think you're going to have some sharps who just decide, what, this number has gotten too long, but I'm staying away.
Dabbundo, you understand where I'm coming from with this, though. When I see the size of Duke and I see the way they've rolled through this tournament, and really, if you look at their performances from January 1st on, outside of that Clemson game they lost, they've been a freight train. I do not want to put myself in a position where I'm stepping in front of that freight train. I did it last year with Alabama and UConn, and the line was a lot higher, and I remember just being distraught that I couldn't find a way to cover that monster number with Alabama. I'm starting to get those vibes from Duke. I'm not doing it, dude. I'm laying the 4.5.
Well, I mean, you mentioned them being a truck. Houston has not lost a game in regulation since November 9th. They have one loss in regulation this year. It was at Auburn, it was against Auburn in the Toyota Center in Houston. So kind of a home-ish game. They lost in overtime to Alabama, overtime to San Diego State, overtime to Texas Tech, and they've won every game since as well. And I think that's the big difference. Duke might be, on the level of UConn last year, but there was no other team that was close to the level of UConn last year. This year, I think you can actually make that case. And certainly the metrics would make that case that there have been 3 teams with Houston, Auburn, Florida that have played at Duke's level all season. Now, the question is, does the cream rise to the top? And that's where I think you kind of have to get into the matchup a little bit. And that's where, as I've looked into it, I've kind of come down to the conclusion that I came into it thinking too many points. Houston will be able to stay within 5 here and keep this close. But the more I've looked into the matchup and thought about Duke's offense against Houston's defense, the more I've said, I think there's going to be a lot. And I talked about this on Monday with Proctor and Flagg kind of running pick and rolls. The key, and always the key against Houston, if you survive the first pressure, can you get the ball to the backside of the defense? Because Houston swarms as well as anybody in the country. And if you can get to the backside, you're going to have a ton of open looks. And this is really what Miami did to beat them 2 years ago, where Wong and Pack were running the pick and rolls, and they were great shot makers, but they also got a ton of looks kind of in that, right wing corner or left wing corner for a guy like a Knipple or even a Proctor, James. Like, there's just so much good shooting on this Duke team. That's the scary part. Like, they could end up similar to what Baylor did a couple of years ago when Houston made the Final Four, and Houston showed up with this elite defense, and Baylor just roasted them with their guards and found a ton of open threes. So that's the scary part. That's the path to Duke just running them out of the gym here and getting a 10-point lead by half.
Okay, Dabbundo, if you're playing the game, who are you taking?
So this total was 137, and now it's down to 135.5. I'm going to wait and try to snipe a better number under, mainly because you get a little Final Four nerves, and these are the 2 best transition defenses in the country. So there's just not going to be runouts. There's not going to be these quick back and forth kind of whiplash. And I think we maybe fell in love with, overs in this tournament because we all watched Alabama, we watched Duke, Arizona, we watched BYU. Generally speaking, the market has moved toward overs in this tournament. I think this total is a touch high if it gets back to 137. So that's where I would play this. And I really have no opinion on the side here. I think that this is correctly priced, and I don't want to stick my neck out, whereas the other game, I'm much more likely to do it.
That's a good transition, because when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, there's another game in the Final Four we are going to break down. They are 2 teams that have matched up earlier this season. They are 2 teams coming out of the same conference, and the narrative and the line from what it was back in, January is drastically different. Florida-Auburn will break down the SEC battle in Game 1 of the Final Four. East Coast Bias Boys on FanDuel TV, and of course on the Ringer Gambling Show. We're coming right back. All right, boys, let's get to the battle of the SEC to kick off the Final Four. Raheem, in general, when you have rematches, do you put a lot of stock in what you saw in the first matchup? Because Florida laid the smackdown against Auburn. The point spread is drastically different back then to what it is right now. It was a couple of months ago, for goodness sakes. You putting a lot of stock in that, a little stock in that, or absolutely no stock in that?
I put a little stock in it just because they beat Auburn at a time, and this is before Auburn went on their late season struggle. This was when Auburn was rolling, so I think you do have to put a little bit of stock in it.
Okay, now let's get to the line adjustment here at the bundle, because Auburn and Duke, for most of this college season, were positioned as 1 and 1A on the odds board in the national rankings to go and win the national championship. Florida was really a team that emerged as the SEC season moved along. They go and have a great run in the SEC tournament. They end up as the number 1 seed. Is this line, you think, out of whack now with the Gators favored by 2.5, or is this entirely Broom related?
I think there's a little bit of Broom question, especially because the path for Auburn winning this game, I think, relies pretty heavily on Johni Broome, more so than even it does in a normal game. Of course, he's one of the high usage biggest, most commonly used players in the country. So it's not a surprise that he's important, but I think in this matchup, especially, he's extremely important to it. So, I mean, I assume he's going to be okay. I don't suspect we're going to know either way until literally the game tips off. And so, we're kind of guessing a little bit, but I mean, I personally think the line has moved a bit too far. And, these teams would have been priced as coin flip-ish for the last month or so. So to have it at 2.5 now is quite an adjustment.
Interesting. Okay, Joe House, you were a big-time Florida backer at the beginning of this tournament. Now as we get ready for this game, SEC battle, Bruce Pearl, a lot of size for Auburn. Auburn team that's gotten off to slow starts and then comes storming back. We saw that against Creighton. We most certainly saw that in the Sweet 16 game against Michigan. Didn't get off to a slowest start against Michigan State and ended up winning the game comfortably, even though they didn't shoot it great. And then you have this Florida team where there have been inconsistencies with the bigs, but Clayton is absolute money at the end of these games. He willed them home in the UConn game. He willed them home in the Texas Tech game with some cooperation from Texas Tech free throw shooters. And now we have a 2.5-point spread. So, Joe House, I will defer to you. Florida, Auburn. Line has the Gators by 2.5. What's your play?
So my inclination, JJ, is to just grab the points. And the main reason for that is I've been so impressed by Auburn's defense. They have been holding their opponent to under a point per possession. Now, Florida's only been held to that standard once. It was against Tennessee back in February, and Florida, has been capable of scoring. But Auburn, if Janai Broome is healthy, now look, when they matched up earlier this season, they missed half their free throws, and they were only 50% at the rim. This is Auburn. They had 30 shots at the rim and only made half of them. If you get some improvement at the free throw line and in terms of scoring at the rim, I think Auburn is legit. I also, with that stranglehold defense that Auburn is capable of, we've seen Florida go on these droughts. Like, it's required heroic efforts by them at end of games to keep themselves from getting knocked out. So, that's not a recipe that you really want to invest in. 2.5 feels like I would stay away if it was a point. I wouldn't bet aside, but at 2.5, I'm going to go ahead and grab it with Auburn.
I'm right there with you. And Dabbundo, I think we're going to be aligned on this. To me, Auburn's defense and what they can do as far as being physical, as far as the amount of bodies they can throw at you, and the size that they have down low, I look at all of that, and it's problematic. And if I'm Florida, look, Clayton at the end of these games is going to scare the living daylights out of you. If this game is close, we know that Clayton can go and bring it home for Florida. But I just think Auburn been the better team all year, like the matchup with what they have from a size standpoint. I got no problem taking 2.5. I think Auburn's winning the game.
Yeah, if you go back to the first meeting, because I went back and I rewatched it because I was curious. And there's two things that kind of stand out. First thing was Broome did not have a great game. They refused to double him in the post. So, and we saw, Williams for Texas Tech and even Toppin for Texas Tech kind of back them down and bully them inside and create, advantageous situations for just the shooters and for themselves and kind of dominate this Florida post defense, which has not been good this season, 44th percentile. So Auburn should have a better game than they did that time in the post. The second thing, I was on the other side of the ball. Auburn was extremely aggressive against the ball screens. We've seen their pressure kind of take Michigan and Michigan State out of their offenses. Florida kind of used that to their advantage and had a lot of backdoor cuts and lobs and kind of took advantage of how aggressive Auburn was. I think there is a counter move to that for Auburn to maybe not over swarm and over commit to some of this ball screen stuff, because I agree with House. Florida's half-court offense has not been all that impressive. And when Maryland, they got to run against Maryland a bunch, and we saw how dangerous they are. But when they couldn't run against Texas Tech, when they couldn't run against UConn, it's oh, man, this is not elite. Certainly, it's a lot of late shot clock and Walter Clayton, bailing us out offense. And so who do you trust more in the last 3 to 4 minutes in a half court? Again, it's crazy to say I trust Auburn more because we've seen Florida do it twice, but I still trust Auburn more. I think their path is more simple with Broom on the inside versus Clayton just continuing to be Mr. March. I mean, now Mr. April.
How does the Broom injury impact things, though? If you're thinking from a betting perspective, and like, how do you price that in? I mean, are you giving that a half a point? Are you giving that a whole point? Are you saying that he's just going to come in 100%? Like, how do you measure that if you're placing a bet on this game?
I don't know. I think there's questions about how healthy he's been, period. Because, he had that ankle thing and then he was out and then, they haven't been as good. And, I think Auburn could be in the national championship on Monday and we could still look at them and be like, how good have they been in this? We could do the same thing with Florida. It's like, how good have they been really? Because I don't know. I think, that there's a lot of uncertainty with that part of this, but I'm sure they're going to give him the finest painkillers in the land to give it a go. So just going to have to take my chance there.
Well, and I almost get the sense they are factoring in this injury, though, Raheem, to the line that you're looking at. Because for Florida to be a 2.5-point favorite, I think is a little eye-opening, quite frankly. So I wonder if that
is it really eye-opening considering what happened in the first matchup? What was the line for the first matchup?
All year has been one of the best teams in the sport. So I am a little surprised this line has gotten as high as 2.5, to be honest.
But if you look against the spread, Florida's 27-11 against the spread, 34-4 straight up. They have the best record against the spread amongst all four teams remaining. Auburn's 21-16 against the spread. So obviously the market is telling you that, Florida's been the better team against the spread. They've overperformed the market. So how can you not make them favorite based on what happened in the first game and how they've performed against the market this season?
Well, and I think their run and the way they kind of plowed through the SEC is kind of enhancing that value that much more. I think that's playing a role here. But doesn't mean I have to like them in the game. And I don't, Raheem. Now, if you had to make a play on this game, who would you take?
I don't have anything on this game.
You're not going anywhere. Now, from a total perspective, Dabbundo, the fact that we have seen this matchup before, does that help us as far as the total is concerned or not really?
I don't know. You can get kind of a little overreactive to be like, here's one game, right, where Florida shot the ball really well, put up one of their best games of the season against the Power 4 team in conference too. Like, that's notable, but there's for every move, there's a counter move. So I don't really take too much into account from what happened in the first meeting. The interesting thing is that, these are conference foes and the SEC had such an up and down. We're going to play our style. Does that change in a Final Four? Do the teams go a little slower? Do they say, hey, we need to value the ball more? Or is it just baked in Auburn's DNA that they're going to have 6 laughable turnovers every game? That's the question. I would lean toward the under just reflexively at a number this high in a Final Four game because of the magnitude of it all. And so that would kind of keep me from betting in if I had to bet a total, I'd bet the under.
AD, as a final thought, FanDuel has look-ahead lines for what we could see on Monday night. And there is a line for Duke Auburn. There is a line for Duke Florida. There's a line for Houston Florida. There's a line for Houston Auburn. Out of any of those potential look-ahead lines, is there anything that you immediately, maybe perhaps in your mind, circled?
Yeah. So the Florida Auburn total is 159.5 for the semifinal. There is no earth where a Florida Duke total should be the same as a Florida Auburn total. Duke is slower. They deny transition better. Florida will have to play in the half court in that game. I think that total right now sitting at FanDuel 159.5 is all the too high. And then much in the same way, Florida and Houston at 143.5. I would love to see Florida's offense go up against this Houston blitz and crazy scheme here. I think it'll be a fascinating matchup, especially because Florida's bigs would be put in interesting situations defensively. So I would go with those unders to me immediately. Like both Florida unders are a little high to me, basically being priced way above these. You're just not going to get transition points against Houston and Duke. You just don't. That's not how you play. So I think that would be a huge detriment to Florida if they got to the finals because they're so much more reliant on transition than Houston or Duke. So that was the two that stood out to me.
Anthony Dabbundo, we will see you Monday night on East Coast Bias as we will have a take and a play, hopefully, on the national championship game and enjoy the games in San Antonio via Syracuse, buddy boy.
Yeah. I wish Syracuse could get to one of these once again, but we might be waiting a few decades for that.
Well, I can guarantee this, Dabbundo. If they do, you and I will be taking a show on the road, and we will find our way to whatever the destination of the Final Four might be, because if that does happen again in my lifetime, I am absolutely positively not missing it. So Thanks for joining us, AD. When we come back, we have the way too early look at NFL over-under win totals that have been unveiled on FanDuel. We discussed this a couple of days ago. Now the guys have had a few extra days to let it marinate. We'll see what's on mind of House and Raheem when we come back. Welcome back. It's now just JJ, House, and Raheem, and it's the way too early look at the 2025 over-unders for NFL win totals. And mind you, fellas, we do not have a draft yet. That's coming at the end of the month. We're going to have draft props in the next few weeks. We'll see how those markets move. We don't have a schedule yet. Now, we know who everybody is going to play, but as far as the front-loaded nature, back-loaded nature, the rest, the advantage, disadvantage, we don't know that stuff yet. So we can only base our information on what we see with a line and what we see now moving forward. So I'm not going to run through 32 of these yet, guys. We have all summer to do that. We'll have the official picks then. This is more of like a meeting of the minds, a way too early look, a way too early read. House, I will give you the floor first. What was the first way too early read that you saw?
So JJ, I'm honestly kind of appalled because
appalled. That
I'm
speaks
appalled.
Something for you. I mean, my goodness.
I have 6 plays that I like, and a handful of which were sort of auto plays for me. But here's the appalling thing: I'm square because the lowest price among the 6 that I like that's out there is minus 105 on the Dallas Cowboys over 7.5 wins. I love Dallas's.
That's
over.
Your favorite one of the bunch. Interesting.
Well, it's the only one where the price is fair. The next lowest price is the Kansas City Chiefs under 11.5 at minus 130.
So you don't want to pay the juice. I understand that.
The juice is insane on the ones that I love.
Well, here's
I love
the problem,
the Rams.
though, House. Here's the problem.
Go ahead.
If you don't want to pay the juice, you may not get that number in a month from now. That's the only thing I would tell you.
I'm with you. I mean, this is the thing. So I'll just run through it super quick. I love the Bills over 11.5, minus 140.
Same.
Expensive as a mother.
I'd lay
Kansas City under 11.5, minus 130.
See, that one's scary. I get the argument and I get the logic. It's still Kansas City, though, House. That's the only trepidation I would have.
Well, I believe in math. Dream can tell us the Pythagorean how many wins they should have had last season. It was last season felt like an aberration.
Sure.
And I still don't know who's playing on their offensive line.
Okay.
But that would be the case. The Raiders over 6.5, minus 140. Minus 140.
I love Pete Carroll. I love Jim. That division's brutal. That one I'd stay away from. I'd stay away.
Here's the reason. Here, I'll do that one super quick. There's 6 games where they are either going to be favored or they're basically pick'em games. And this is the basis for an over for the Raiders. They're going to be pick'em or favored against Jacksonville, Tennessee, the New York Giants, the Cleveland Browns, who they play at home in Vegas, the Indy Colts, which is, they'll end up probably a tiny bit of a dog there. And then they are on the road against the New England Patriots. So by the time the season starts, that might move them into more of a dog class. But those are all, that's 6 games right there. And I'm not saying, what's their record in those 6 games. If it's 4-2, then I love them getting to 7. That's the basic order of operation there. And then the whole world is on the Rams over. The Rams over is minus 145. The number is over 9.5 wins. And they have the exact same price to win the NFC West as the San Francisco 49ers at plus 170. So those are the ones that caught my attention, but I just hate being on the wrong side of the price.
House, I'm so glad you mentioned the Dallas Cowboys over, because that one immediately stood out to me. When you look at the Dak Prescott era, you go before last year, they won 7 games and Dak Prescott didn't play half the year. Before that, they won 12 games in 3 years straight. As long as Dak Prescott is healthy and they have CeeDee Lamb and they have Micah Parsons, this team should be able to win half of their games. So that immediately stood out to me as well. Now, another one that stood out to me was the Seattle Seahawks under 8.5. Now, FanDuel has 7.5, but there's some 8.5s out there in the market, and I'm sure FanDuel is going to put some adjusted markets up at some point in time. But I really like the Seahawks under 8.5 wins for many reasons. First things first, you get rid of Geno Smith. And I believe that Geno Smith in the Seahawks system with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is no longer going to have Kevin O'Connell, who's one of the best offensive-minded head coaches in the league. He's no longer going to have Justin Jefferson. This guy is a major downgrade. So I really like the Seattle Seahawks under 8.5 wins. That is probably my best bet on the board because look, House already said it. Everybody's betting the Rams. The Rams should be a lot better. I also think the 49ers, who had a tough season last year, they're probably going to have some improvement, although I do not like them. I don't like them to go over, but I still think they're in a tough division. I think Arizona is going to be tough. So give me Seahawks under 8.5 wins. That's my favorite.
Raheem, you got a full-fledged endorsement for me on that one. I absolutely adore Seattle as an under. I think they're a team in transition. You mentioned the departures, whether it's Geno Smith, whether it's DK Metcalf, whether it's Tyler Lockett. And I almost feel as if they are transitioning to the next era, which is Mike Macdonald, and he kind of has a free year to do so because he looked the part in year one. They still won a bunch of games. It's clear that he's a good head coach, but I think he wants to get his people, his system, his sort of vibe in there, and they're kind of using this year. They're not going to come out and say it, but I think they're doing it as a quote-unquote bridge year. My question to you on Dallas, though, Raheem, everything you said is accurate about Dak Prescott, but now they have a new head coach. Do you put any hesitation in the idea? And listen, Mike McCarthy in postseason scares the living daylights out of you, but I think the Mike McCarthy, Dak Prescott narrative almost goes side by side. They win in the regular season. I mean, McCarthy every single year for the most part was churning out winning records in Green Bay, and then, of course, with Dallas. Now it's the unknown of Brian Schottenheimer. Is that cause for concern?
No, because the first 4 years of Dak Prescott's career came with Jason Garrett, and he's going over this number in all of them. So I think what we're not recognizing is that Dak Prescott is a top 10 quarterback, probably a top 7 or 8, to be honest with you. So if you have him and CeeDee Lamb, it's been proven that this guy can win you half of your games. So I'm willing to back this, even in a tough division with the Eagles, even in a tough division with the Washington Commanders. And then obviously they probably have the worst team in the league.
Well, bingo, Raheem, you just led me to one of my favorite ones. And House, I know you mentioned the fear factor of juice, which I get and I understand. Raheem, I'm jumping on this before the number moves. I'm betting the Giants under 5.5 wins. This team is not getting to 6 or 7 wins. I'm sorry. I don't care if it's Russ Wilson. I don't care if it's Jameis Winston. The division is brutal. Their schedule's brutal. And they stink. Where are they getting those wins?
They aren't getting them. They're terrible.
House, lay that juice, baby. Don't think about it.
Yeah, I'm minus 150. I'm not going to make the case for the Giants. If you were somebody that wanted to be a little bit of we would say that the defensive line that grossly underperformed last year for the Giants is going to have a bounce back. You would say that Neighbors and Tracy, that's a combination on offense that you put with a competent quarterback. Now, I mean, is Russell Wilson competent? Maybe.
No, I'm leaning towards no, to be honest with you.
I think the deep ball
would be the case.
I think the deep ball to Neighbors might, it might lend itself to playing some Neighbors overs this year.
Well, I like the sound of that. Now, Raheem, you mentioned Miami, my favorite team, the other day. This did not work its way onto the favorites. Is this like an honorable mention for you?
I actually like that one. I still like that one. It didn't make its way towards the favorites because I just was trying to, come up with some new stuff. But I think it's a good one. I really do. I think the division is going to be better. I think it's some real blow up potential with that team.
I can see that. And they do lose Calais Campbell to the Arizona Cardinals, who was a big part of that defense. Don't sleep on that. Still a very underrated player in the league. Guys, I think there's value in finding an AFC South team. That was the other one I wanted to throw at you guys. And I know you're going to look at all these teams and there's going to be feelings of queasiness. Houston losing some offensive linemen. I was surprised the public house was all over their unders because that defense looked really stout in the postseason. CJ Stroud still is a good quarterback in this league. I still think they deserve to be the favorites. But I always look for like the new coach bump. And I thought the win total for Jacksonville being at 7.5 House, I think told the story of how they could be a team that maybe we should be looking to get in on this year. There's no way in the world I'm getting in on the Colts. I hate their quarterback room. I can't stand it. I'm out on Richardson. Sorry, Dabbundo. Daniel Jones, enough said. And I just don't like the vibe around the Colts. The Titans, they're retooling. It's a rookie quarterback. They got a lot of needs on the roster. I think Jacksonville in that division at 7.5 is someone to monitor. I think they could be an improved team if Trevor Lawrence can stay on the field.
I'm going to be a million miles away from Jacksonville. I can't have a rational response to them after what they did last season. There was no reason whatsoever for them to be as bad as they were over the course of the season. And the way that they lost their first game of the season against Miami, where they had that game in hand, well in hand for much of it, and then Miami came out and exploded in the latter part of the game. And eked out a win. It really it was the end of the season. There is something that stinks institutionally with them. I know that they have the coach improvement. I think that guy is a very good potential head coach. I just don't want to have anything to do with the Jaguars. I
understand
don't want to be in business with them.
No, I get that. Raheem, that division, though, I see opportunity. Is that fair?
At least with the US, do you see opportunity with the Jaguars, or do you see opportunity with pretty much anyone else?
Not Indianapolis and not Tennessee. I'm looking at Jacksonville and Houston as two teams I'm targeting as overs. I think people are overreacting to Houston's offseason. I still think they're going to have a winning team, my opinion.
I mean, you have a top 10 quarterback, and then you have a head coach who's, defensive minded. They were a great defense last year. So I can understand wanting to go over 9.5 on Houston again. They probably should be a shoo-in to actually win the division. I think that may be the way to play it. It's just to play. What is their odds to win a division? I'm curious.
Well, they're favored. They're favored. You're not going to be paying the price like you're paying for the Buffalo Bills. I bet
it's
you.
Still plus money. It's plus 125.
Plus 125.
Oh, yeah. I almost think you could just, as long as they have CJ Stroud and there's nobody else in that division, I think you're doing well for yourself. Now, I got one that I think you should probably jump ahead of, and House probably is going to disagree with this one, but I think you need to grab the Pittsburgh Steelers over 8.5 wins.
Is that assuming you think Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, Raheem?
And yes, because you're getting plus money on that. You're getting plus money on that. And then Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season.
Ever.
He's never had a losing season. And now you're probably getting an upgrade at quarterback. And if you look at the fact that there's now 17 games and he's never had a losing season, you got Aaron Rodgers and you still have that defense. I think you jump ahead of this. This probably goes up. Maybe you can, position yourself for a nice little middle.
Hey, you lose the bet. At least you make history,
I don't have any issue with the Pittsburgh over. We just watched it on repeat. Even last season, they did the thing that they were supposed to do, which was grab as many wins as they could. They had an unprecedented, brutal stretch run schedule. We did in our preview that the fact that Pittsburgh, the only way for them to make the playoffs was to win all of those games up front, and then they went and did it. So look, at 8.5, plus money, is there really that big a difference between Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers? I don't think so.
I'd say an upgrade. I think you're getting an upgrade for what it's worth. Based upon what I saw last year, I still think you're getting an upgrade. So, Raheem, I'm with you, buddy. Give me the Steelers over 8.5. But that said, if it's Mason Rudolph all year, I am not going to be feeling good about that bet. We got a lot more coming your way. We got our ringer grab bag, which we'll get to. Some NBA, some maybe assorted torpedo topics that might be working their way into the equation. That more right after this. All right, it's time for a little East Coast Bias grab bag. House, let's start with you on this one. Monster stat line for Mr. Jokic. MVP odds moved a little bit. Enough for you to go and get involved, or is it signed, sealed, delivered already for SGA?
It's SGA. It's SGA every day, all the way. That man earned it. He's earned it all season long. They have the best record in the NBA. There is still yet a chance for them to get to 70 wins this season. Oklahoma City has been incredible, and SGA has been the straw that stirs the drink. It's SGA's year.
Raheem, any interest?
So Tim Bontemps, he always has a straw poll. It came out yesterday, and it came out the day after Jokic had that 60-point triple-double. And look, obviously it's not reflected in the poll, but SGA has 77 first place votes, and Jokic had 23. And I think that's a good indicator of how people will vote. And I think with the Oklahoma City Thunder, them having the best record all year and them having a chance at 70 games. Now, I don't think they're going to go for it. I think they're going to eventually just sit everybody down. But them just being the best team all year. I mean, right now they're 62-12. They have the highest point differential in NBA history. I just think it's unfortunate because Jokic is having probably one of the best seasons in NBA history. But SGA is going to get this award.
Raheem, here's one for you. Who are you looking forward to fading more in the postseason? The Memphis Grizzlies or the Houston Rockets?
It's definitely the Memphis Grizzlies at this point in time. And it's unfortunate because, I look at this Houston Rockets team and I don't really trust their offense. It's just as far as being a team who just has a guy. If they had traded for Jimmy Butler, you could be talking about this team going to the NBA Finals. But the Memphis Grizzlies are in a bad spot. I mean, their defense has absolutely fallen off a cliff after the All-Star break. They fired their coach, and they still haven't won a game. A lot of times you get that new coach bump. It has not happened for the Memphis Grizzlies. So I think the Memphis Grizzlies, they are in danger of falling out of the playoff picture as a whole. I mean, they're going to find themselves in the playoff race. I mean, in the play-in race. If you look at the Minnesota Timberwolves, if you look at the schedule that they have one of the easiest schedules. I mean, you look at Thursday, April 3rd, they got the Brooklyn Nets. Then they got the Philadelphia 76ers on April 5th. Then they got the Milwaukee Bucks on April 8th. That's a little tougher, but no Damian Lillard. You got the Memphis Grizzlies on April 10th. You got the Nets and the Jazz to close out the season. So I think you can pencil the Minnesota Timberwolves in the top 6. And the way the Warriors are playing, I think they could pass Memphis as well. So I really think Memphis is going to fall out of it.
I just want to endorse Dream's observation here. And FanDuel does not have odds at the moment for Memphis to miss the playoffs, but they do have Sacramento to make the playoffs. And Sacramento, because if I totally agree that Memphis is going to end up in that play-in, Sacramento to make the playoffs plus 370. Now, I don't love it, but I need to find a way to fade Memphis.
Might be worth the poke. Might. Keyword might be worth the poke. My near and dear New York Knickerbockers are probably staring the Milwaukee Bucks in a first-round series in a face-house because it looks like the Bucks are going to be in 6. Indiana, Detroit probably going to be in the 4 and 5. Milwaukee should have my attention. Yay or nay?
No. Their season's over. Congratulations to the Knicks on their 4-1. They'll dream the Greek Freak will have one game to remind everybody who he is, but then the conversation is going to start in this offseason about the Greek Freak in Milwaukee. I hate to say it, but that is the direction that they are headed, because this thing that Dame's confronting is bad, and it doesn't have like an easy resolution for guards at this stage of his career, and they owe him $50 million plus over the next 3 years. Milwaukee is in a bad way, and it all starts with this playoff run.
Final one, gentlemen. Raheem, torpedo bats are the craze of Major League Baseball a week into the season. They apparently have had a major impact on the Yankees and their home run hitting ability over the first few games. The Yankees are not alone. This technology is available to everyone. There are a bunch of players suggesting they are going to use them. Some of them may already be using them, like Ellie De La Cruz, who hit some monstrous home runs for the Cincinnati Reds. The torpedo bats, Raheem, would have you very skittish as a bettor going anywhere near totals in the early going of this year. Is that a yay, or am I overreacting too much?
I think you're overreacting, and I think the books are going to capitalize on people overreacting, specifically on home run props. Like, I think they're going to overcharge you. I also think, when it comes to totals, this stuff is going to be priced in. So, it's earlier on in the year. We're not at a point to where it's just like we can make a judgment of how much of an impact these bets have already made. And I think they've already used some in the past, I believe. So I think at this point in time, you're better off kind of fading some of these totals, maybe going under, maybe going a no for some hit props, and see what happens that way. Because I think a lot of people are going to be playing these home run props, yes, and I think they're going to eventually get killed.
Well, and you've noticed, House, with a lot of these games early in the year, usually, especially if you live in the Northeast like we do, cold, dreary, ball's not going particularly far. Usually it lends to a lot of low-scoring games those first couple weeks of the baseball season. with these bats and with some of the home runs, you haven't necessarily seen that. But I think Raheem's onto something here. You don't want to go nuts after, what, a 4 or 5 game sample size.
No, and I don't bet baseball until May. I mean, that's just the house standard. I let the dust settle a little bit. I mean, when the Miami Marlins come out and win 3 of their first 4 games, I know that I need to stay away. I need to be out of that marketplace. But let's just let the dust settle a little bit.
Let me flip the script on this. I have a grab bag question for JJ, and I asked you guys this on Monday.
This. Beautiful.
Do the Braves suck?
I am not there yet, Raheem. I know they've gotten off to a dreadful, dreadful start. Remember, Padres, Dodgers to kick off your year on the West Coast. That's as tough a back-to-back stretch as you're going to have. They lose Profar with the suspension. They don't have Acuna at the moment. I'm going to have everybody relax on my pick to win the NL pennant, the Atlanta Braves. I'm not there. I need, Raheem, a month and a half of crummy baseball for the Braves before I'm going to bury him. I'm not there yet after 2 bad series. Fair?
Okay. All right, that's fair.
And I know they've looked awful, and I know they've been pathetic. Not ready to bury the Braves yet. When we come back, best bets. It might be Final Four. It might be the NFL future variety. It might be the NBA future variety. We'll see the boys going to take this when we wrap up East Coast Bias right after this. All right, gentlemen, best bet time. Take it any which way you'd like. House, let's start with you.
Going right to the Final Four. I love the under in this Auburn-Florida game. 159.5. It was at 160.5 on FanDuel. Folks have been jumping on it. I still think it's a crazy total. It is the Auburn suffocating defense. They're going to, a Final Four venue. The kids will be amped. It's going to be Brick City. Give me the under 159.5 in Auburn, Florida.
All right, under to start it off, Raheem, best bet city.
Let's go with Lou Dort, Defensive Player of the Year, 10-1. We know Jaren Jackson Jr. is out of this right now. The Defensive Player of the Year race is wide open because Memphis Grizzlies, their defense stinks right now. Draymond Green is the favorite right now, but I look at who is the best team in defensive efficiency in the NBA. It's the Oklahoma City Thunder, 107 points per 100 possessions. Who guards the best player on the opposing team every night from the Oklahoma City Thunder? Lou Dort. They given up 30-point games to opposing players just 8 times this year. So let's take a shot on the Defensive Player of the Year, who should be Lou Dort.
Guys, I'm giving you a 2-team parlay to wrap up the Final Four Saturday. Duke and Auburn have been the 2 best teams in college basketball all year. They are going to match up on Monday night in the national championship game. I'll take Duke on the money line. I will take Auburn on the money line. I will put them together, and I will be cashing a ticket, bringing it into Monday night. Duke, Auburn. We'll see you then. For House, Raheem, JJ signing off. Good job by the boys. As always, Tucker, Stefan. Enjoy it. We'll chat next week. Be good, everybody.